This is Tell Me Something Good About Retail with Bob Phibbs, the retail doctor.
You should always be able to take the sale. I mean, if your customer wants to pay with goats, then you are probably going to figure out a way to accept goats.
Welcome to Tell Me Something Good About Retail with your host, Bob Phibbs, the champion for a more human connection in retail for over 30 years as a retail doctor. Bob is the authority on brick-and-mortar retail across the world, who works with some of the biggest luxury brands to independent retailers of all sizes.
Welcome. I'm delighted you're here today. Today's episode took a turn the moment I came across a thought-provoking newsletter from Nikki Baird on LinkedIn. The title, If Your In-Store Tech Ends Up in a Drawer, This Is Why. Well, that really hit a nerve. And Nikki is the VP of Strategy and Product at Aptos, and she's one of the sharpest minds when it comes to retail innovation. So let's kick things off by diving into her perspective. Nikki, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Are retailers investing in the right store tech, or are they just crossing their fingers that it won't fail?
Well, I mean, it's a little bit of both, honestly. It's more than like the tech in stores encompasses a lot of things, right? It's the hardware, it's the software, it's the network, it's the usability and UX of it. Like there's so many pieces involved that while all of those individual things are stable and been around for a while, when you put them all together, you can sometimes get surprising results, and there's a lot of risk that it could end up in a drawer.
And we're going to get to that in just a second. You said retailers should stop making tech decisions based on whether it works offline. So what should be the top priority when you're evaluating store tech today?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the point is really to focus on how it's additive to the experience. But I think in the past, we've limited or we've sort of set this barrier out there that said, well, if it can't work offline, then we can't put it in stores because we have to be prepared for stores to work offline. And I just think we've reached a point where you cannot have that expectation for how technology is going to work in the store. Not to say that you should just go completely online and not worry about failover or any of those things, but that shouldn't be the bar for doing something that has to go into a store. You should really consider how it enriches the customer journey.
I love that. And you push back on the idea that offline is useless. What's
Yes.
the one? That's an understatement. So you have to read her newsletter. What's the one offline capability retailers should still fight to preserve, though?
The ability to transact. I mean, you should be able to close a sale whether you're online or not. And there's that's not so easy, right? That's easy to say. It's not easy to do. You have to have the right floor limit for your merchandise that you're selling. You have to work with your payment provider to figure out how to get back online and how those transactions are going to be processed and handled. So it's complex, but you should always be able to take the sale. I mean, if your customer wants to pay with goats, then you are probably going to figure out a way to accept goats.
That is going to be the cold open of this episode. So thank you, Nikki, for that treasure. I was interviewing the director of marketing for Verizon at Retail's Big Show, and we started talking about broadband and how it's really like water. We just assume it's there. And most retailers ended up with the cheapest version they could. And then we just glom all these other technologies onto it. And he said a single store could go out and not be able to take a transaction. That's a huge deal and pays for the tech in itself, right? And you've said a single failed mobile transaction can kill associate trust. Can you give me an example of that? You had a great example of what that means.
Yeah, people talk about offline and online like it's one thing, but there's really many levels to that. And one of the levels is even just walking from access point to access point in a store. So if you're in the middle of a transaction and you want to have this great conversational experience with customer and you're walking and yes, I'll take your payment, and you happen to switch from one access point to the other right at that point in time, if you don't have failover capability or the ability to sort of seamlessly move online, offline on the device, that transaction is going to get dropped. And then if it fails or you get some kind of weird error message as a store associate, you're going to look at it and be like, sorry, I don't know if I charged you or not. Should I try it again? And that's how it ends up in the drawer.
Right. That's huge. I checked into I think it was the Hilton in New York City for a retail show, and the app wasn't where I said it. I've checked in. He's like, "Oh yeah, that app never works. I have to do it manually." I was like, "Yeah,
No,
that's not what anyone wants to hear at,
no.
at a New York City hotel, dude." But that's a real point. That's what your part of your newsletter was, that it only really takes one transaction like that for the associate to go like, "Whoa, I don't want to be embarrassed."
Yeah. Well, and I want to be, I don't want to get yelled at. I don't want to cause distress to a customer. So distress to a customer is distress to a store associate. And if it's just easier to leave it in the drawer, then that's where it ends up.
And that's expensive. So what's
Mhm.
one thing that retailers should stop asking for when it comes to in-store tech because it's just not realistic?
Oh, well, they want both, right? They want the offline resiliency and they want the ability to transact anytime, anywhere, whether they're online or not. But they also don't want to give up all the online richness. So we have debates all the time about, well, I don't want customer data on the device, right? Because I don't want that device to walk out the door. I don't have control over that. But I want offline customer lookup. And you're like, not compatible.
Right. That's huge. Well, that's my main parts. Now you get to riff on anything you said in your newsletter. You can espouse to us right now. We were at the golden age of retail at Shop Talk 2 weeks ago. That was before tariffs changed that probably from golden age of
Oof.
retail. But anything you would like to share with us, your thoughts?
Well, I'll add on. So one thing that I didn't put in the newsletter that I thought about, but I was like, it's long enough. One of the other reasons why in-store tech ends up in the drawer is because retailers don't come back soon enough to improve the things that they didn't quite get right the first time, right? It's such a huge lift to get tech into stores that often what happens is the IT team is like, "Yay, we're done." And then they go away and then they don't come back for 2 years, right? So that's another place where if a store associate is like, "This is too many clicks," right? It takes too many clicks to do this, or this never works, or I'm never sure if it works. You have to come back around and address those things. That's part of increasing their confidence and trust that they're going to get what they expect out of that experience.
I think that's great. I will pivot to Starbucks. Many years ago, Starbucks was just dying. People were putting 40, 50 mix-ins and wait times were getting terrible. And then they had to go back and actually ask the baristas like, "So how can we make your job easier?" Because everybody saw it, but in a retail store, not everybody sees it, to your point, right?
Yeah.
And so it just becomes leave the device in the drawer.
Yep.
So any final words you would like to share with us?
You mentioned the golden age, and I'm sorry, I don't often get to take credit when I'm right. I was like, I don't think this is the golden age at Shop Talk, so I'm going to take credit for calling that before the tariffs came. If it was the golden age, it's because it was the moment right before the Great Depression, which hopefully does not turn out to be true, but it was definitely a bit frantic at that show.
Yeah, and it was a bit jarring because of the message. Well, I still believe, and I know you do too, that we're going to get through this. We've been through an awful lot of things, that whatever we're in the middle of, we're in turbulence like a plane. Buckle your seat belts. It's got to be a long ride,
Yeah.
but you just have to be able to talk. And I appreciate you spending a few moments with me today to share your thoughts, because these are the conversations that I think a lot of people miss about technology. And like you said, there's a lot of layers to all of it. So thank you for joining us today, Nikki. That blend of trust, tech, and timing is where the real work begins for retailers. And that's exactly why I wanted to continue this series of conversations, because while technology might drive innovation, it's people who bring it to life. Let's continue with stories about retail and the human touch, and I've got some super guests, including Dan Hodges, the founder of Retail Store Tours based in New York, Ethan Chernofsky, SVP of Marketing at Placer AI, Laura McGuire, former president of Man Made Music, Shep Hyken, Hall of Fame speaker and customer service expert, and the Chief Amazement Officer of Shepherd Presentations, and Dax DaSilva, founder of POS company Lightspeed and author of the book Age of Union. They all add to this dialogue around technology and humanity, so let's continue with Dan Hodges of Retail Store Tours. And you have some real distinct pillars that you've developed over the years that, like, this is what makes great retail. And if you're not hitting these, there's no way you'll be a great retailer. So can you just take us into that world and what the pillars are and explain them in, not too much detail, but I don't want you to gloss over anything you think is important.
Okay. So the single most important factor is the human touch, because, Apple hires people who are kind and they evaluate them based on empathy. And if you look at the earnings reports of Apple or Williams-Sonoma or Sephora or Nordstrom, it's no coincidence. Hermes basically had a record year. So it's hiring those people who are kind and empathetic, who will look at you on a hot day and offer you a glass of water, very, very tuned in. It's very much about you. The second is training. And the question really is, how do you get them to be so good so consistently? And Sephora basically has, Sephora University, and they train people between 15 minutes and an hour every day. And Nordstrom and Williams-Sonoma are constantly training their people and giving them skills.
Can we unpack that just for a second? Did you say Sephora trains how much per day?
They spend between 15 minutes and an hour on various types of quizzes or product quizzes or policies and procedures. And it was that way at Barney's, because Barney's would start out every day with between 45 minutes and an hour and 15 worth of, we have the new sweaters in, or the new Italian fabric. So yeah, it's and when you think about it, if you and I weren't in retail and you had the New York Giants and I had the Atlanta Braves, or let's say that we're coaches of both teams.
I'm the Yankees, except this year. So
there you go. So what made the Yankees get to where they were, or where they were in the past? It's the training, it's the push-ups, the sit-ups. And so what Sephora, Williams-Sonoma, Apple are doing, they're constantly training their people to keep them on the edge of customer engagement and product, so that when you go in, you're immediately disarmed. And you're ready to, I love Sephora because you go in, you break the geofence. Oh, Dan, if you spend $10 more, you'll get a facial. And I got to tell you, I've lost so many, I've lost people on these tours. When they start looking at their phone, they say, and then, bye, Dan, we'll catch you later.
I'll be right back.
Be right back. Yep. So,
well, I want to add in here before you go too far on the pillars. So what I take from that is a learning brain is a working brain. If the synapses are firing, you've got people connecting this to that. They might be doing a mock session. They might be comparing and contrasting. The brain's alive. Why so many retailers are struggling right now is we allow the brain to go down into sleep mode, like your computer. And then we wonder, when people walk in the door, they aren't greeted, they aren't made to feel anything, because the brain has gone asleep. You haven't kept it moving, which is really what you're talking about with ball players and professional athletes and musicians. They've got to keep that brain, those synapses firing, so that they can be on their game. And it's preventable. That's the whole point, that training keeps that brain learning, which keeps it happy, which also cuts down on your turnover. And it also raises your average check. There's no bad things, except a lot of people say our people are already trained. And then you walk in and you see something different. So not to interrupt your flame of thought, what makes great retail.
But to add to what you're saying, the sports analogy is absolutely 100%, because when you go to, let's say, a butcher, right, and you ask for a cut of meat, and they'll discuss how many people you're having over, and what are you serving with it, and so that type of an engagement. It's I go to your house, and you're happy to see me, and would I like a glass of water? Maybe I'm hungry, or maybe I want to go in the backyard and have a nice talk. So it's no different. We've been this way for 200,000 years. Chances are we'll probably be this way for another 200,000 years. So it's we've got this great big computer on our shoulders, as I mentioned earlier, and it responds very well to the human smile. It's very hard to resist a human smile. And once you connect with someone, sort of the bonds of trust are trying to establish themselves. And, as Dale Carnegie said better than anyone else, if you want to be people interested in you, you must be interested in them.
Yes, and if you aren't familiar with the mother of all customer experience books, check out Dale Carnegie's How to Win Friends and Influence People. Well, this conversation with Dan tees up the great conversation I had with Ethan Chernofsky at Placer AI. Their company tracks how people move in retail environments, and we were just getting started to talk about generational differences.
I think we tell ourselves that that's what Gen Z wants. But if you actually look at what Gen Z does, they're indicating that that's not what they want. They actually care about touch and feel. They care about brand authenticity. But that means going into a place and developing a relationship. What it does mean, though, is a changing conception of what a store is supposed to do. So one of the areas where we fail is attempting to take new concepts, but shove them within an existing format. And so I'll give you an example that I know you'll appreciate. As we were talking to a group of a really big retailer, and we were talking to their stores team. And we made this comment of how we fail to recognize all the values that a store brings. Like if you have a great associate at a store, and like I walk into an Untuckit and I buy a shirt that I love, and I end up buying 6 more online in all these different colors, that initial person who helped me gets no credit, and we give no value to the store for enabling those other sales. And that's where we're dropping the ball, because we're not recognizing that this is when we say omnichannel, the whole point is that it's supposed to be looking at everything holistically, not viewing digital channels in competition with offline channels. And we do it to a ridiculous extent. Like I was talking to someone who was saying that digital channels are going to make the store irrelevant. And the example he gave was BOPIS, buy online, pick up in store. The example he gave has the store in the term because you actually require the store to pick up the item. It is, to a certain extent, we've lost our mind, and we're pitting these things against each other. And instead, when you look at really smart retailers, they're viewing things as different levers they can pull to make the customer happy. And when you view it that way, that's when kind of the magic happens.
I think about like my mom. Every year she was a teacher, and she would buy her 2 1-pound boxes of See's candy, and there would be the nuts and chews, and then there'd be the fruits and the other ones, and you'd open up and you had all these different little chocolates, right? And so you sometimes have to bite them and go like, oh, that's not good. Well, I think that's what a lot of the big retailers have been doing, and realizing like, I got to have 50 chocolates in here, and this may not taste good, and I don't know how this is going to work, but we got to put it out there. And you know, I live up in upstate New York, and our big retailers, I have 2 stoplights in my town, but the big trip is to go to Catskill, where there's a Lowe's and a Walmart and some others. And what's interesting is Walmart has the whole big thing of buy online, pick up in store, curbside, right? Places you can go. And yes, last year that thing had a line. And nowadays it's not much. Does it mean it was wrong? No, probably at their value. That's just a chocolate.
Yeah.
Now, is that where every mall should be spending their time? I don't think so. This is the year you should be decking every inch of your mall. You better be having every Santa Claus. You better be having breakfast with Santa, breakfast with Scrooge. I don't care. But I think we've just barely started putting the gas down on where this holiday is going to take us. What do you think? I
agree with you completely. It's interesting. We were having a conversation about Amazon within the home improvement space. We got a question from a major retailer in that sector asking, how should we compete with Amazon and all these digital channels where they're dominant? And the answer is that shouldn't be your primary focus then. When you are competing, figure out what your strength is. And I mean, the example that I really love is Burlington, maybe a month before the pandemic, announced that they were shutting down their e-commerce site. And people were up in arms of like, how dare you not have an e-commerce site, even though you're telling us it's not working, nobody's buying from it, and it's not good. How dare you shut it down? And then the pandemic hit, and those people who had been up in arms were all of a sudden incredibly happy because they were like, look at these dummies who shut down their e-commerce site. Goodbye, Burlington. It's the end. And yet now, when you look at Burlington's performance, they're destroying without an e-commerce site. Now, should Burlington have a digital offering? Of course. But it should be Burlington's digital offering. It should be centered around what Burlington does well and what customers expect and want from Burlington. To copy and paste what Target is doing doesn't make sense because they're not Target. And I think when you go back to that Amazon example, don't compete with Amazon on Amazon's terms. Compete on your strengths. Recognize the things that you do well as a brand. And this applies to the mom and pop shop to the same extent that it applies to the largest chains in the country. But understanding the unique elements of your offering are what you want to center everything around: your store experience, your online experience. I think forgetting that is the key ingredient to any recipe for disaster.
Forget what your strengths are and you chase every shiny object. We've seen it in big and small retailers. Do what you do best and don't try to be something you're not. Now let's join Laura McGuire as we talk around sound in retail environments.
Well, it's interesting. I think to understand any of this, you take a step back, and we always talk about sort of primal humans. And at the core, you can hear farther than you can see. So that's why sound is your most critical sense. It was the difference between, you heard a rustle in the bushes and you knew lunch was about to be served, or you were about to be lunch. So that's why sound is so critical to us. And it's so funny because in retail spaces, it's the last thing anyone thinks about. And it's the thing that people put the least amount of money in. It really gets overlooked as a sense. And as we started to speak to our clients, our clients weren't coming to us for retail. They were coming to us for technologies and mobile applications and sonic branding. But then once meeting us and working with us, they were like, oh, what about retail? And I think when it comes to those big retail experiences where people are spending a lot of money to do everything right and make it really experiential, our forward-thinking clients are realizing, oh, sound has to be a part of this or it'll screw it up.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because, when as a motivational speaker, I always, when I'm setting up, I'm putting on Motown because that's my music. I'm old. I get it. Okay, boomer. I get it. But you know what? A lot of the staff will say, you have the best playlist. And people are like, well, I always just put on what I like, or I just put on, feel good music. And that's not really always the answer, right?
No, but
what are those?
Think about how emotionally connected that is to people's understanding of you. So it may be what you like, but as people are getting that first impression or getting to know you and the staff is hearing this music that you choose, it's very much a reflection of you as a speaker. And brands need to think about it, and retail spaces need to think about it the same way. You are going to connect the sound that you're hearing, whether it be music, whether it be noise, to that brand and what they're putting out about themselves. And it either is or is not going to emotionally connect.
That's a great point. I know I also had a speech one time and I walked in, it was, I think 2:30 in the afternoon, and they had on spa music. And I said, what are you doing? And the guy's like, well, this is what the client wants. It's like, I don't give a dang what the client wants. They just had carbs. No. They're going to be asleep by the time they're here. And so what are some of that's a challenge too, right? That when you don't know why or how, you just do something. So what are some of the challenges that you faced in retail that maybe you didn't get in entertainment?
The entertainers get it. They get how important sound is to storytelling. I don't think retailers always take cues from those spaces. What's interesting is all of our retail work, we take cues from theme parks because we were in theme parks first before we were in retail. So we think about everything in terms of what does it contribute to the experience. You walked into a room and heard spa music and you thought about the people you were going to be serving and their mental state. They're going to be tired. I need them to get pumped up. I don't think retailers don't always think about it that way. So how do you serve the customer? How do you tell your story is always what we need to consider. But in retail, there's a lot of X factors when it comes to sound. There's really poor acoustics sometimes. There's these displays that people spend a lot of money on and put a lot of sound in that are just projecting it out into a space in a way that's not great. There's lack of identity where there's the same top 40 playing. And the biggest thing we see over and over is when retailers don't control environment in a store-to-store location.
Okay, stop.
So you walk into
what does that mean exactly? We don't control
location. So employees, as great of employees they are, music is the one thing they might try to take into their own control. And if you don't explain the importance of the music that you've chosen and why you've chosen it, I remember us doing an audit once. A client sent us around the country to audit different retail spaces. And we were blown away by, 2 stores within 10 minutes of each other. One still had, it was March, and they were still playing the holiday music because they hadn't gotten a new CD. And they were just like, I don't know, and kept playing the holiday music. And then within 10 minutes in a more urban environment, but the store employees had chosen like hard rap radio in a store that it was definitely wasn't on brand. So you were walking into these 2 stores 5 miles apart, and you were getting a completely different experience. And it set such a strong tone that we walked back in and sort of recorded it to be like, this is how it feels walking into these 2 stores. So, that idea that employees have will, and I'm not saying, what I'm saying is actually you need to think about your employees when you do sound. You need to think about creating an environment that they need to live in, and you're asking them to happily serve your customers in.
So many times we start a new program or technology thinking of the gee whiz of it all without thinking who else might be impacted by the program, like our associates, our warehouse workers, or delivery agents. Think about all of those people before you hit go. I spoke with Shep Hyken about delivering on promises brands make in their marketing and taglines, so let's listen in. So you say a brand is a promise delivered. So what difference does it make, like in an Ace Hardware example, what is it about the Echo and the brand promise that you like so much about Ace in particular?
Well, I mean, there's so many variations of the brand. It's the promise delivered. So a brand promise is something that's very outward. It's something that the customer may even see. What is Ace Hardware's tagline? It's actually their brand promise, a helpful hardware place. Okay. So, and by the way, I wrote an entire book called Amaze Every Customer Every Time, and it is using Ace Hardware as a role model throughout the book. A very retail-oriented, focused book, but I chose them for a reason. Number one, nobody had ever written a book that used Ace Hardware throughout. They had examples, and everybody's written about Amazon and Zappos and Apple and all these other great brands. Ace, one year, I was looking at, this is why I did it. There was the top 25 customer service brands in the world, according to Business Week, and Ace Hardware fell in at number 10, ahead of the Ritz-Carlton, which surprised me. And it turns out the reason is because of all of the feedback that's publicly available through all the different channels and the comments that are made and the ratings and all that type of thing. Anyway, the brand promise, the helpful hardware place. So when I was doing my interviews to learn about Ace, I got it over and over again from different executives. We understand what good customer service is. You can walk into Home Depot, Lowe's, Menards, any of the other big chain box stores, and you're going to get good customer service. You're going to get friendly customer service. But are you going to get helpful customer service? And helpful is where they believe their secret sauce and their differences. So the reason I chose Ace is they're a dealer network. Each one of those stores are owned by an individual, family, whatever. Some of them might have 2 or 3 stores. There's a few that have a few more, but they're all independent retailers. Smaller retailers that go up against large box stores, and they win over and over again. It's like a David and Goliath story. And I don't care if you are a large store competing against another large store. Ace has competition just, I think, at a higher level, so we can all learn from that. But what Ace has done is when you walk in and they go, hey, how are you? Welcome to the store. They don't ask, can I help you? They ask, what can I help you find today? And when you tell them, they start to identify what type of a shopper you are. Do you already know? Are you a mission shopper? Are you a regular? Are you the social shopper that wants to talk to a salesperson? Or do you really need help? They have all these different types of personas, if you will. But when you tell them what you want, they lead you there and they ask you things like, I remember I went, and of course I did my research by going into numerous stores. So I went in to get a hinge replaced years ago, and I said, what can I help you find today? I'm looking for one of these. Let me show you where it is on the way there. What are you using it for? Well, obviously for a door, but specifically what kind of a door? And I explained it. They go, you don't want that. You want this. Wow. And it was less money, saved money. But the point is, had they not been willing to help me as opposed to just friendly tell me where it is in the aisle that I'm looking for, I would have walked out with a product that wasn't as good as what I ended up with. That's what helpful is. And that's their secret sauce. So they've taken their tagline, which is a brand promise, and they deliver on it. And actually, they certify dealers. And not every Ace Hardware store is Ace certified. They strive to be, but they prove over and over again through mystery shopping programs that they are delivering on that helpful mantra.
And that has a cost to it, and that has a dedication, and that's why they're doing so well. I love that. Well, let's take...
And it does have a cost, but it also has, has payback, right? It has ROI, and that's important.
So you had to get that back in, which is exactly the right point, which is there's always a return on training and investment. It's not a cost, it's an investment. You've heard it over and over on this podcast. Invest in your people before investing in discounts. Why? Because people forget 20% off coupons, but they'll remember your helpfulness, your passion, and the feeling you give them that they matter. Because only when people feel they matter will they open their wallets and leave your store with your products. Our final guest this month is Dax DaSilva. He's the founder of Lightspeed Commerce. You know, it can be overwhelming and hopeless to watch the chaos coming out of Washington right now, but as Dax presciently said early on, everyone can be a change agent.
Yeah, so Age of Union, the idea behind the book is really to ignite each individual person as a change maker. We each have a sort of a unique capacity to do something positive in our own way. And I think the overall sort of aim of the book is to realize that we actually have a lot of separation and a lot of division, in the way that we experience the world. The pillars of the book, leadership, culture, spirituality, and nature. There's four pillars. You tend to think of these things as very separate. And as humans, we love to put things into boxes. And there's a lot of diversity and there's a lot of difference in the world, so there's lots of different kinds of leaders. There's many different kinds of cultures. There's lots of types of spirituality, and there's so much biodiversity in nature. And so Age of Union, the book is to start to see things more holistically. Instead of looking at things through the lens of division, start to look at things, look at all this diversity through the lens of unity. And I think that that's part of what the answer is to some of the things that are real challenges that we see on the planet.
Well, that's what I appreciate about it. Let's face it, in the last week, we've heard about how the Amazon is on fire, and it's easy to pick winners and losers, and you need to do this and all of that. But really, you're kind of a call to arms that it's up to us to take that mantle on, and what we can do. For example, just in that instance, I mean, what would be some ideas you have about how we could support this great calamity that's going on, right?
Well, I think that the Amazon is a great example of how we have to look at things holistically. Why is land being cleared in the Amazon? The land is being cleared primarily, for animal agriculture, and so human beings never ate 3 meals a day primarily of meat-based protein. If you go back 50 years, 100 years, our insatiable desire for meat is causing us to develop land that is much needed wilderness, and so the things are very connected. The Amazon doesn't go on fire and doesn't get converted into agricultural land randomly. It comes from the choices that we've made. And I think that change begins with our choices. And so that there is something that people can do on an individual basis that guide our choices towards things that are less destructive, less harmful, and more conscious of how we live on this planet and how future generations are going to experience this planet. So when you look at an issue like the Amazon and you decide you're going to blame a politician or the system, you will often find that is the symptom of what our daily behavior is, and so that's why I think that, yes, there is a lot of responsibility on our leaders, but there's also a lot of responsibility on us as individuals, and that's how we can be change makers each and every day in the way that we in the way that we act.
Yeah, I appreciate that. At the end of the book, you have an awful lot of ways that we can take action, and certainly more than post the clip on Facebook and people like it, like makes me angry. Okay, next thing, right? You need them to actually take some initiative about it. And you talk about becoming a better listener in the book. Is this something that you mentor your employees about? And if so, how do you teach that, or how do you share that?
Well, it's funny because people always think that the more you talk, the smarter people think you are. And I think it's really just the opposite. The more you listen, I think the more people respect you, whether you're a leader or whether you're, a member of a team. And I think it's when you listen is when you deepen your knowledge of other people's perspectives and understandings, and that actually creates richer solutions. When you listen to other people's perspectives, it shapes your own, and it shapes the ultimate solution to maybe a challenging problem that not one person can solve with. And so being a better listener, I think, actually is a way to be a better leader, and also to have a richer outcome.
So would it be a way that we're in a meeting and there's, I don't know, I'm with 5 developers and we're all in a meeting with you, and you're going to expect each one of them to talk? Is it like that? Kind of like forced speaking? Or is it asking, what did you hear him say, and asking people to summarize it? I mean, listening is such a crucial skill. And I just think it's important to nail down what that looks like for you. With tariffs and supply challenges, it can feel overwhelming as retailers. Our experts have shown that success comes from focusing on timeless fundamentals, doing what you can do. So this week, try just one thing. Either invest 15 minutes daily in training your team like Sephora does, or audit your store's sound environment, as Lauren suggested, or define your helpful difference like Ace Hardware, or simply plan to listen more to both your customers and your staff. Small changes in these areas can transform your retail business. Remember, it's not about competing with digital giants on their terms, but excelling at what makes your brand uniquely valuable to your customers. Which approach will you try first? I'll see you next month on another edition of Tell Me Something Good About Retail. In the meantime, check out my blog at retaildoc.com. Good selling.
You've been listening to Tell Me Something Good About Retail with Bob Phibbs, the Retail Doctor. As a listener, you can receive free information and guides when you visit retaildoc.com and sign up for our exclusive weekly newsletter. Thanks for being with us. Remember to subscribe on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you like to get your podcasts. To virtually bring Bob to all of your crew and associates, check out www.salesrx.com.